So my Backpacker's Random Thought of today is going to be about a little history lesson in the backpacking industry and how the death of print media was the rise of a lot of these garage-grown, cottage industry, lightweight backpacking gear companies. And the way it used to work in the old days, you know, the publisher was the gatekeeper. And so industry or manufacturers had to pay through ads to reach people like me in these magazines. And I had to buy a subscription to the magazine to find out about the manufacturers and the products. So the gatekeeper was the publisher, and that was that way for years, and it took tens of thousands of dollars in those days to, you know, make a color print magazine, and advertising was the lifeblood of that. And so as the internet came on, digital media, social media, that replaced all of these print magazines. And I saw it coming years ago, even in the book industry. You know, I'd give talks at bookstores and even libraries and tell them 15 years ago that print was dead, and they didn't want to hear that. But as it turns out, of course, I was right. And so my story, the example I will use is how I was introduced to Hilleberg. So in the back of Backpacker magazine was a little classified ad, color ad, every month with a Hilleberg tent. And, you know, I noticed it over the years, but, you know, when I did the CDT, I lived in a bivy sack. So at the turn of the century, so that was 99. I love saying at the turn of the century. So in 2000, I wanted to continue from where I left off in Glacier on the CDT to Jasper on the Great Divide Trail, but I didn't want to live in a body bag all the way up that trail. So I wanted a good tent, and I actually sent for some information on the Hilleberg and decided, you know, even though it was expensive, that was the tent I wanted. And I had a small little newspaper, the Dickey Bird News, so it was backpackers, bird watchers, and berry pickers, you know, outdoor nature magazine. And I offered Hilleberg a year's worth of advertising if they would exchange it for a tent, which they did. And as it turns out, I just kept running the ad for years because I liked the tent, I liked the people. As you can see, I still like the tent. And this is an Enon. At that time, I bought their lightest one was an Octo. And same tent, different design, but pretty much the same inside tent. But that's not my point. My point is, I liked this tent so well, I wrote an article for Backpacker magazine, and they liked it, and they bought it, and they offered me $200 on publication. And I watched, you know, every time my magazine came in. And again, I've been a subscriber, probably one of their first subscribers, and I never throw them away. I still have bins of them around here. And so I kept looking for my article. It never came out. And of course, you know, I'm sure what happened was they dangled my article in front of Hilleberg and said, if you know, run a bigger ad, we'll run this article. And of course, they probably didn't want to run a bigger ad, and they never ran the article. I never got my $200, and time went on. And as it got toward probably 2-3 years ago, I was finding that there was nothing in that magazine for me anymore because I'd gone to all this cottage, homegrown, small operation gear, and I really wasn't interested in all the big advertising and the articles they were doing in that magazine, because they would do articles on people that had the big cannons that could give them ad money, which was the lifeblood of their business. And so when Reagan left the Democratic Party, he told them, I didn't leave the Democratic Party, the Democratic Party left me. And so I wrote a letter. I didn't want to just stop subscribing to Backpacker, so I wrote a letter to the editor, who happened to be the gear editor when he bought my story. Now he's the editor, and I said, you know, I didn't leave Backpacker Magazine. Backpacker Magazine left me. There's nothing relative in here for me anymore because it's all about gear that I'll never use anymore. And they denied that's the way it worked, but I'd bet my last dollar that's why my article never ran. They never paid me. But, you know, I understand that. It's just a cost of doing business. But now, with all the social media, digital media, internet voguing and blogging, these companies, they don't need that advertising. They don't need that gatekeeper. So the gatekeeper, again, he's the guy that takes money from the manufacturer in the form of ads, and he takes money from me in the form of subscriptions so we can get together. And we don't need that anymore. Now you can go online and see any product in the world and watch 20 people using it. So these companies were able to grow because they didn't have the big cannons. They didn't have those dollars to spend on advertising to reach their customer, but they don't have to anymore. And so you're seeing so many, I mean, you can go on YouTube, and if you don't like a review that I do, you can watch 10 other people do a review. You know, companies do send product to certain influencers, and that's just good advertising, but you know, you have to take it with a grain of salt. If a guy gets a tent and uses it in his backyard and does a review and says it's great, that's probably not what you want to hear. But you can go on YouTube and Google that product and find 15 people that have done a through hike with it or have used it a lot, and what the consensus is. Just like on Amazon, before I buy anything, I read everybody's reviews. You know, some people would bitch if they're hung with a new rope, but if you take a consensus, you know if you're going to get a good product or not. So it's really changed the way I buy gear, the way I research gear. So unless you're old as dirt like me, you don't remember how it used to be, but it's much better now. Trust me. Keep smiling.